Hyperambush, a recovered corridor log from the interstellar courier ship Nightingale. If you're hearing my voice, then the jump already happened. If you're hearing my voice clearly, then you're too close. My name is Elias Sato, Security Specialist, Third Watch. That's what the roster said before the roster began rewriting itself. That's what my uniform patch said before it peeled away like wet paper, as if the ship was ashamed to admit I belonged to it. I am recording this in a place that should not exist, a corridor that is longer than the ship that contains it. There are no windows here, but sometimes I see stars anyway. And sometimes I see myself, dead before it happens. I need you to understand one thing right away. This is not a story about brave people doing the right thing. This is a story about time, the kind of time that does not flow. It clots. And it hunts. One, the hum that turned into a whisper. Warp feels like pressure in your teeth. Not pain at first. More like the universe is pressing its thumb against you, testing how soft you are. The ship wraps itself in a field, folds the space in front of it like fabric, then slides into the crease. We call it a hyperjump because entering the wound between worlds doesn't look as good on recruitment posters. I'd done 32 jumps on the Nightingale. This one was supposed to be easy. We were carrying a sealed cargo cylinder out past the Decius belt, a 2-day run in normal space, 14 minutes in warp. The manifest didn't say what was inside, only that it belonged to a private research consortium with more money than caution. The crew was small, 12 souls and 1 shipmind. We ran lean. Captain, pilot, nav, engineer, medic, 2 techs, a cook who also doubled as systems, and 3 security including me. When you're escorting something rich people don't want to lose, you don't worry about pirates. Pirates are made of meat. They need oxygen, fuel, weapons. They can be seen. They can be killed. What I should have worried about was what had been waiting in the crease. At the 5-minute mark into the jump, I was making my rounds. Night shift is mostly boredom and routine, checking locks, peeking into sleeping quarters, walking the same clean metal corridors while the ship vibrates with the quiet violence of FTL. The hum changed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even obvious. It was a shift in the underlying note, like a choir dropping a single half-step, so subtle your skin notices before your ears do. Then, layered under the hum, came something else. A whisper. At first I thought it was comms bleed, someone asleep, talking in their dreams over an open mic. Then I realized the whisper wasn't coming from my headset. It was coming from the corridor walls. I stopped under junction C17 and pressed my palm to the plating. The metal was cold. It always was, but tonight it felt wet. And the whisper, muffled by alloy, sounded like 100 people trying to inhale at the same time. I pulled my hand back. My reflection in the brushed steel was wrong. The face was mine, but the eyes moved a fraction late like a bad sync. The corridor lights flickered. Somewhere deep in the ship, the warp core coughed. Vesper, I said. The shipmind's name tasted strange in my mouth, like saying it through a mouthful of sand. Report. Any anomalies in the field? No answer. The intercom was silent. That was the first impossible thing. Nightingale's shipmind never went quiet. Not completely. Even when it slept, there was always the murmur of monitoring. The gentle tick of a mind counting heartbeats, pressures, temperatures, the slow arithmetic of survival. This silence was a missing tooth. I tapped my wrist console. The screen stuttered, then displayed a time stamp. 00:11:04 remaining. Then it blinked. 00:09:22 remaining. Then it blinked again. 00:13:57 remaining. Warp time isn't perfect, but it doesn't jump backward like a frightened animal. My stomach tightened. I turned toward the nearest bulkhead intersection. And that's when I saw the first body. It was me. 2. The first body. In Corridor C, where it meets the service ladder down to the engineering ring, a man lay face down in a pool of dark fluid. The lights were steady now, bright and indifferent. The air smelled normal, filtered, recycled, faintly antiseptic. Everything looked like a ship in warp. Except for the corpse. My corpse. Same uniform, same security patch, same scar on the back of the right hand, thin white line from a childhood accident with a kitchen knife. The body's fingers were curled as if clutching something that wasn't there. I stood frozen, hand hovering over my sidearm. Warp hallucinations exist. People see colors that aren't colors, hear music that isn't music. The medical briefings call it sensory interference due to field harmonics. Most of us call it warp dreams. But warp dreams don't leave blood on the deck. I took one careful step closer. The fluid wasn't blood. It was too glossy, too thick. It spread like oil, but when the corridor's ventilation cycled, it trembled like something alive. It smelled like nothing at all. No iron, no decay, just absence. I crouched, breath shallow, and extended 2 fingers toward the dead man's shoulder. The moment I touched him, the corpse's head jerked. Not up, not toward me. Sideways. Like a puppet yanked by an invisible string. Its neck didn't bend the way a neck should. It folded, then unfolded, then snapped back into place. The face rolled toward me. My face. The eyes were open. But not looking at me. They looked past me, down the corridor, at a point behind my shoulder. The corpse's lips moved. No sound came out, but my bones heard it anyway. Don't turn around. I turned around. I know what you're thinking, he was warned. He was told clearly not to turn around. But the warning didn't come from a living mouth. It came from a dead one, from my own dead mouth. And in that moment, what could "don't turn around" possibly mean? The human brain hates a vacuum. It fills it. It makes meaning. It demands context. So I turned and saw Captain Morrow standing 10 meters away, staring at me. Or not at me. At the body behind me. Her expression was not fear, not shock. It was something worse, recognition. She raised her hand slowly, palm out, like telling me to stop. Her lips formed a single word. Late. Then the corridor behind her opened. Not with a door. With an absence. The air shimmered, then tore, like a curtain ripped by a hand made of glass. Through the tear I saw nothing that made sense. A dark expanse filled with drifting shapes, like jellyfish made of shadow, swimming in a place with no up or down. The whisper poured out, louder now, a chorus of inhalations and undone thoughts. Captain Morrow's mouth opened wider, not to scream, but as if her jaw were being stretched from the inside. Something reached through the tear. It wasn't a claw. It wasn't a tentacle. It was an angle. A sharp line of darkness that bent the space around it, making the corridor tilt as if reality itself was nauseous. The angle touched the captain's chest. And she split. Not cut. Split. Like a seam torn under pressure. Her body opened into 2 identical halves that fell apart in different directions, and for a fraction of a second I saw inside her not organs, but a spinning, bright geometry, like the inside of a clock. Then the halves collapsed into meat again, and the corridor filled with the sound you never forget, a human being realizing they are already dead. I fired. My first shots went through the tear and did nothing. My second shots hit the angle and sparked, as if I'd shot a mirror. The angle recoiled, and the tear twitched like a wound. Captain Morrow's halves began to rewind. They slid back toward each other, knitting along the split line as if time itself regretted the violence. Her mouth closed, her eyes blinked. She stood again. Alive. Then she turned and walked away. Away from me, away from her death, away from everything like it had already happened and she was bored of it. I screamed her name. She didn't answer. The corridor lights dimmed. The tier in space narrowed to a slit. And something stepped out. 3, the wrong clock. What stepped out wasn't a creature, the way we're used to thinking of creatures. It didn't have skin. It didn't have limbs that followed anatomy. It had boundaries, and those boundaries were wrong. Imagine a person-shaped shadow, but the shadow doesn't belong to anything. Imagine it wearing the idea of a uniform, as if it had seen one in a dream and decided that was what humans are. Its head tilted toward me, though there were no eyes. The air around it chilled. My breath fogged, then crystallized mid-air, hanging in the corridor like tiny frozen stars. Behind me, my corpse shifted again. The dead Elias Sato's fingers twitched, scratching at the deck like it wanted to crawl. My wrist console beeped. 00, 1104 remaining. 00, 1103. 00, 1104. The countdown stuttered, stuck between seconds. The creature moved. It didn't walk forward. It appeared closer, as if it had edited out the steps. One moment it was 10 meters away, the next it was within arm's reach, and the space between us felt like a skipped heartbeat. I fired point blank. The shots hit something, resistance, impact, and the bullets stopped as if embedded in tar. They hung in the air a centimeter from the creature's surface, spinning slowly, each one vibrating with a sound I felt in my teeth. Then the bullets reversed. They crawled back into my gun, one by one, like time was inhaling. My magazine clicked full again. I staggered back, my mind scrambling. The thing raised what might have been an arm. Its boundary touched my shoulder. And for a single, horrifying second, I saw my own death as clearly as memory. I saw myself running. I saw myself sliding in a puddle of black fluid. I saw myself looking down a corridor. I saw my own body on the floor, face down. I saw my hand reaching toward the corpse's shoulder. I saw the corpse look back at me. And I felt the certainty, deep in my bones, that I had already done all of this. That I was remembering the future. My radio crackled at last. Sato Elias report. Lieutenant Wren, security lead. A good man, an older man, the kind who'd survived long enough to lose his illusions but kept his decency. My voice came out thin. Wren, Corridor C breach, Captain. The words fractured. The moment I tried to say dead, the syllable turned into static. On the other end, Wren swore, "Hold position, I'm coming." "Don't," I said. "Time's wrong in here." "Time's wrong everywhere," he snapped. "Stay alive." The creature's boundary rippled as if amused. It leaned closer and spoke without sound. Not with words, with proximity. My brain translated the presence into something it could understand. "We are here because you opened US." I wanted to argue. We hadn't opened anything. We were just traveling, just crossing, just doing what humanity has been doing for centuries now, tearing holes in the universe and calling it progress. But the thing's certainty was like gravity. I backed away step by step. The corridor behind me elongated. The junction that should have been 5 meters away drifted farther, like the ship was stretching. And the corpse behind me, my corpse, sat up. It moved with the jerky elegance of a puppet. It turned its head, eyes tracking the creature. Then, impossibly, it smiled. I felt my stomach drop. The corpse lifted a finger and pointed at me. Not the creature. Me. The corpse's mouth opened, and this time sound came out. It was my own voice, but older, ragged, worn by things a human throat wasn't meant to say. "Run," it whispered. "Run before you catch up to me." And the corridor lights went out. 4 breach without air. Darkness on a ship is never total. There's always emergency photoluminescence, guiding strips, tiny LEDs on panels. But this wasn't just darkness. It was removal. The guiding strips dimmed like dying fireflies. My wrist console's glow turned to a weak gray. Even the stars outside, stars I shouldn't have been able to see, faded as if embarrassed. In that dim gray, the creature became harder to define. Its boundary wavered, and behind it I glimpsed the in-between. That dark expanse with drifting shapes, a sea of slow, hungry motion. The whisper grew teeth. My comms screamed with overlapping voices, fragments of crew chatter layered wrong. The medic calling for help before the injury happened. The engineer shouting about a pressure drop in a compartment that still had pressure. Captain Morrow laughing as she died and died and died. I ran. The corridor resisted. My boots felt heavy like the deck was sticky. Every step landed with a delay. The sound came half a second after the impact, then 2 seconds, then before the impact, like the ship couldn't decide where in time I belonged. I reached junction C18, slapped the panel for the blast door, and the door began to close. Too slow. Behind me, the creature advanced without moving, and the corpse on the floor began to crawl, dragging itself like a broken marionette. The door was halfway shut when Lieutenant Wren appeared on the far side, sprinting toward me with his rifle raised. Relief hit me like a punch. "Wren," I shouted, "don't come through." Too late. He crossed the threshold into Corridor C. The air around him shimmered like heat haze. His outline doubled, tripled. For a moment I saw 3 Wrens at once, one running, one stopping, one already falling. His face twisted. "What the?" The creature reached out. Wren fired. His bullets didn't hang like mine had. They traveled, but not forward. They arced sideways, curving around invisible corners, then slammed into the walls with showers of sparks. Wren's eyes went wide. He looked down. A round hole had appeared in his chest. No blood yet. Just the hole, clean and dry, as if reality had punched through him and forgotten to fill the gap. He touched it, confused. Then 5 seconds later, blood arrived. It poured out in a thick rush, and he staggered. He was already dying, but his body was only now receiving the memo. He looked at me, lips trembling. I saw," he whispered. "I saw myself." His knees buckled. I lunged forward, grabbed his arm, tried to pull him back through the doorway. My fingers closed around his sleeve and passed through. Not like a ghost. Like his arm was in a different second. I tried again, and my hand met solid fabric, but the fabric was cold, and the arm inside it was already limp. Wren's eyes met mine with sudden clarity. "Elias," he said, voice calm now, strangely resigned. "You can't pull me back. I'm not here anymore." Then his head snapped sideways, violently, like an invisible hand had grabbed his skull. His neck folded the wrong way. He died. The blast door finally slammed shut between us. I stood on my side of the door, staring at my reflection in the metal, my face, pale and sweating, eyes wide with horror. Behind the door, I heard something scrape. Not Wren's boots. Something else. Something that didn't need air to move. My wrist console beeped again. 00:11:04 remaining. Remaining. 00:11:04 remaining. I swallowed hard, forced myself to breathe. "Vesper," I whispered, "shipmind, answer me." Static. Then faintly a voice, female comm 2 comm, slipped through the noise. "Elias Sato," Vesper said. "I have been attempting to reach you for 4 minutes and 27 seconds. "That's impossible," I said, voice shaking. "I just called you." "You will call me," Vesper corrected. "You already did. You will do it again." My blood ran cold. "Vesper, what's happening?" A pause. Then, in a tone that sounded like someone reading a weather report while the sky burned, "We are under hyperambush. Entities from the interstitial manifold have boarded during transit. They are not in the ship. They are in the ship's time." I pressed my forehead to the door. "Can we drop out of warp?" Another pause, longer. "Not safely," Vesper said. "The fold is compromised. If we collapse the field, the ship will shear across multiple frames. Survival probability, 0.6%. "Then what do we do?" The shipman's voice softened, almost human. "We fight in corridors that do not agree on what now means," Vesper said. "And we try to make sure you do not meet yourself too early." Behind the blast door, something laughed. It sounded like my own voice. 5. The Corridor War. The first rule of close-quarters combat is simple: control the space. On a ship, space is corridors, bulkheads, choke points. You funnel threats, you lock doors, you starve them of movement. That rule assumes the corridor stays where it is. Corridor C didn't. I moved away from the sealed blast door and headed toward the central spine, where the ship's main security hub and armory sat. If the shipmind was right, if these things were in the ship's time, then I needed more than bullets. I needed anchors. I needed something that could pin reality down. As I ran, the corridor stretched and snapped back like elastic. Junctions arrived early, then late. I passed the same maintenance hatch 3 times, each time with a different scorch mark on it, each time with a different smell of smoke. I rounded a corner and nearly collided with technician Elias, one of the younger techs, her hair floating slightly as if gravity was uncertain. She clutched a tool case like a weapon. Her eyes were wild. "Elias, thank God." She stopped mid-sentence. Her gaze slid past me. I turned slowly. A man stood behind me, leaning against the wall. He was wearing my uniform. But he wasn't me. His face was close enough to mine to make my skin crawl, like a cousin I never met, like a mirror that had grown a different life. His eyes were dead calm. His mouth curved into a knowing half-smile. "Hello," he said. "You're early." Lysa screamed. The not-me stepped forward and the corridor's air thickened. The lights bent, casting shadows that pointed the wrong way. I raised my pistol. "Who are you?" He blinked slowly. "You don't remember me yet," he said, "but you will. I'm the version of you that keeps walking, the one that makes the same decisions until they become a groove." He lifted his hand. Black fluid dripped from his fingers, floating in the air like globules of ink. Each droplet held a tiny reflection. Face, Lysa's face, Ren's dying eyes. "Back up," I said, voice raw. "Stay back." He sighed, almost disappointed. "Bullets are for things that agree to be hit," he said. "We don't." Lysa swung her tool case at him, desperate. The case passed through his torso like it was striking fog. Then her arm stopped. Not from resistance. From time. Her swing froze halfway, her muscles locked, her face contorted. Her eyes darted to me, pleading. And then, one by one, her teeth fell out. They didn't drop. They floated, suspended in the air, each tooth drifting toward the not-me as if attracted. He opened his mouth. The teeth slid into it. His jaw moved, chewing slowly, thoughtfully. Lysa tried to scream, but her throat was caught in a second that wouldn't arrive. I fired anyway. The shots didn't hit him. They hit the air around him, and the air reacted like glass. Cracks spread across the corridor. Not physical cracks, visual fractures like spiderwebs in reality. Through those cracks I saw the in-between again, that dark sea, the drifting shapes. The not-me stepped back, surprised. For the first time, he looked less like a man, and more like an outline filled with wrongness. "Interesting," he murmured. "You're louder than you should be." I grabbed Lysa's frozen shoulder, yanked. This time my hand met resistance. Her body came with me, like I'd pulled her out of a sticky thought. She stumbled, gasping, and her swing completed suddenly, slamming the tool case into the wall with a loud clang. She clutched her mouth, sobbing, blood pooling. "Move," I shouted. We ran. Behind us, the not me laughed softly, and the sound followed us like a scent. We reached the central spine. The corridor here was wider, reinforced, lined with access panels and emergency supplies. The security hub door was sealed as it should be during warp. I keyed my access. The panel blinked red. Access denied. My code. Denied. I slammed the panel. Vesper opened the hub. Static, then Vesper's voice. "I cannot. There are multiple Elias Sato instances requesting access. Authentication conflict." My heart hammered. Multiple me. In the ship. In time. I looked down the corridor. At the far end, beyond the hub door, I saw movement. Shapes, silhouettes, crew members maybe. But their motions were wrong, like film played backward and forward at once. "Elias," Lysa whispered, tears streaking her cheeks. "What's happening to my—" She gagged, and a black droplet spilled from her mouth. It floated up and drifted away, toward the ceiling. The ceiling rippled like water. Something pressed against it from the other side. I grabbed her and dragged her toward the nearest maintenance hatch. "Forget the hub," I said. "We go through the service crawl, we get to engineering." "Engineering," she rasped, voice thick. "Why?" "Because the warp core was the heart of the fold. If we could anchor it, maybe we could stabilize time. If not, then at least we could die where the ship's power lived, instead of in a hallway that couldn't decide when we were." We pried open the maintenance hatch and crawled into the narrow service tunnel. The air inside smelled of ozone and old dust. And in the tight darkness, something whispered my name. Not from ahead. From behind. Right next to my ear. "Elias." I whipped around, pistol raised. The tunnel was empty. Except for a handprint on the wall, glossy black, as if someone had pressed a wet palm there. The handprint was my size. And it was fresh. 6, the ship that remembers. Service crawls are supposed to be boring. Pipes, cables, insulation, the quiet guts of a machine. You go in, fix something, get out. This one felt like a throat. The tunnel narrowed and widened without reason. The metal around us pulsed faintly, like the ship was breathing. In the dim light of my wrist console, I saw scratches along the walls, marks that looked like fingernails, dragged in panic. Lysa crawled behind me, moving slowly, one hand pressed to her bleeding gums. She made small, wet noises that turned my stomach. "Keep going," I told her, trying to sound steady. Ahead, the service tunnel opened into a vertical shaft that led down toward the engineering ring. A ladder ran along one side, and the shaft dropped into darkness. I looked down and saw a light. Not the faint glow of engineering panels. A bright, steady light, like a lantern in fog. I descended carefully, boot on rung, hand on rail, every muscle tense. Halfway down, the light shifted. It moved up toward me. My breath caught. A man climbed toward us. Engineer Havel. Except Havel had died 3 hours ago. I knew because I'd seen his body in the galley, slumped over a table, his eyes open and empty, his fingers still wrapped around a spoon. I'd assumed it was an accident at the time, some warp sickness, some sudden aneurysm. Now he climbed the ladder like nothing had happened. His face was pale, his eyes were too bright. "Don't go down," Havel said. His voice echoed oddly, like it was coming from 2 places. "Engineering is gone." I froze on the ladder, heart pounding. "Havel," I whispered, "you're—" "Dead," he finished, a tired smile tugging at his lips. "Yes and no, I've been dead in 3 different ways tonight. You get used to it." Lysa whimpered above me. Havel's gaze flicked up. She's bleeding into the fold, he said. That's bad. What are those things? I demanded. How do we stop them? Havel sighed and looked past me, down into the shaft. They're not things, he said. They're occupants. We cut through their habitat every time we jump. We make a bubble of reality inside the in-between and we call it safe. He leaned closer, voice dropping. But this cargo, this cylinder, it's not cargo, it's a beacon, it's a map, it's a mouth. My stomach twisted. The consortium, I said, they knew. Havel shrugged. They suspected, they wanted proof, they wanted to catch one like you'd catch a fish. He met my eyes. And now the fish are in the boat. The ladder rungs vibrated. Below, the bright light flickered. A shadow moved. Havel's face tightened. They're listening, he said. They learn by watching. They learn by repeating. That's why you keep seeing yourself. They're trying on your shape, your choices, your fear. How do we anchor time? I asked, voice shaking. Vesper said. Vesper is remembering, Havel interrupted. The shipmind is not predicting. She's recalling. The fold here is folded over itself. Every moment is stacked like pages in a book. The entities flip through us like a kid tearing out the good parts. He reached into his jumpsuit pocket and pulled out a small device, a palm-sized ring of metal with a core that glowed faintly. A chronal pin, he said. Prototype. I was building it for the consortium because of course I was. They paid enough to make me forget what I was doing. He handed it to me. It was heavy, colder than it should be. What does it do? I asked. It tells the universe, this moment is mine, Havel said. It forces a local agreement on time for a few meters. Not much, not long. Then we use it, I said. We. Havel shook his head. No, he said quietly. You use it, I'm out of time. His hand tightened on the ladder. His knuckles whitened. I frowned. What do you mean? He stared at me with a strange intensity. You're going to see yourself dead, Havel said, over and over, and you're going to think it's a warning, a prophecy, a trap. He leaned in until his forehead nearly touched mine. It's not, he whispered. It's a landmark. You have to die. That's how you find the seam. A cold dread slid through me. Listen, Havel said, voice urgent now. There's a room in engineering compartment Theta behind the core shielding. It's not on the schematics. It was built around something we found. Something older than the ship. Something that doesn't like being noticed. He swallowed. The entities can't go in there. Not fully. It hurts them. It pins them. How do we get there? I asked. Havel smiled, sad. You already did, he said. And then his body shimmered. His outline blurred, doubled. For a moment I saw him as a corpse slumped in the galley again, then as a skeleton, then as a child, then as an old man. Then he was gone. The ladder rung under my hand became slick. Black fluid seeped from the metal. From below a whisper rose, louder, hungry. I looked down into the shaft and saw my own face looking up. Not the corpse. Not me. Me. Alive. Climbing toward me. Elias, Lysa screamed behind me. There's something. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Because the Elias below smiled. And raised a hand. And I saw clearly the gun in his grip. My gun. And I understood with a sickening certainty that he was about to shoot me. And that I had already watched it happen. 7 CHRONAL pin. I moved without thinking. The moment the other Elias raised the gun, I slammed the chronal pin against the ladder rail. It latched with a magnetic click. The ring's core flared bright white. The air snapped. A sound like a deep bell rang through the shaft, vibrating in my bones. Real-time caught. For a heartbeat, everything aligned. The other Elias froze mid-climb, his smile stuck, his finger hovering on the trigger. The black fluid on the rung stopped crawling. Lisa's scream above me hung in the air like a note held too long. I took advantage. I dropped. Not down the ladder, off it. I let go and fell into the shaft, trusting the ship's gravity to do one honest thing. As I fell, the frozen world cracked. The chronal pin's light dimmed rapidly, like a dying star. The other Elias' frozen eyes tracked me, even as his body remained stuck. His lips twitched, forming a word I couldn't hear. I hit the bottom hard, rolling pain flaring through my shoulder. Engineering ring. The air here was warmer, tinged with the metallic scent of coolant and burnt insulation. Emergency lights pulsed red. The warp core's hum was louder, strained like an engine choking. Lisa tumbled down after me, landing awkwardly, crying out as she bit her ruined gums. I dragged her to her feet. The engineering corridor ahead was open. Too open. The walls seemed farther apart, as if someone had stretched the ring. I could hear voices, crew members maybe, shouts, screams, laughter. But all of it sounded distant, muffled, like coming from behind thick glass. Compartment Theta, I muttered, remembering Havel's words, behind the core shielding. We ran. We passed the main engineering bay entrance. Inside, I glimpsed movement. Engineer Dima wrestling with something that looked like a tangle of wires. The wires wrapped around his arms, his neck. He was screaming, but the sound came out delayed, arriving seconds after his mouth moved. A shadow clung to the ceiling above him, spreading like spilled ink. We didn't stop. We couldn't. The corridor curved, then straightened, then curved again, the ship's geometry shifting like a dream. We reached the core shielding door, a heavy, reinforced hatch designed to protect the crew from radiation and heat. The panel beside it blinked green. For a moment, I felt relief. Then the panel's light flickered. Green. Red. Green. Red. Like the ship couldn't decide whether we were allowed in. I slapped my palm to the scanner. The hatch opened. Inside was a narrow passage lined with thick lead and composite shielding. The air was hotter, dry. My skin prickled. We moved deeper. The passage ended in another door, one I'd never seen on schematics. No label, no panel, just a smooth circle of metal embedded in the bulkhead with a faint seam around it. A door without a handle. A door that looked more like a scar. As we approached, the whisper in the walls changed. It quieted. It retreated, like a crowd stepping back from a predator. Lisa shivered. Elias, I don't like this. I didn't either. I pressed my hand to the door. The metal under my palm warmed. Not from heat. From recognition. The seam around the door brightened with a soft blue light. And the door slid open without sound. Beyond it was darkness. And a smell like old stone. Not ship metal. Not machine. Stone. I stepped inside. The door closed behind us. And for the first time since the jump began, the countdown on my wrist console stabilized. 00, 11:04 remaining. It ticked. 00, 11:03. It ticked again. 00, 11:02. My breath hitched. Normal. God help me, normal. Lisa sank to the floor, sobbing quietly. I looked around. We were in a room that did not belong in a starship. The walls were carved, not welded, curved stone etched with patterns that hurt my eyes to follow. The air was still heavy. In the center of the room stood a pillar of black material, like obsidian but matte, swallowing light. The pillar pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. And in its surface I saw reflections. Not of us. Of other versions. Other moments. A dozen Elias Sato stared back, each one with different injuries, different expressions. Some were dead. Some were smiling. One raised his hand and pressed it to the pillar from the other side, palm matching mine. His eyes were empty. His mouth moved. I couldn't hear him, but the meaning slid into my mind anyway. This is where they keep us. Behind me, Lisa whispered, voice small. What is this place? I swallowed, throat dry. Havel said they built the room around something they found, I murmured. Something older. I stepped closer to the pillar. The patterns on the walls seemed to shift, like they were trying to align with my gaze. The pillar's pulse quickened, and in the black surface, a new reflection appeared. Not me. Not a crew member. A shape made of angles and shadow, pressed flat against the surface like a spider under glass. It stared out at us. Then slowly it smiled. And the pillar cracked. 8. The room that hurts them. The crack in the pillar wasn't like stone breaking. It was like silence splitting. A thin line of pale light appeared in the obsidian surface, and the room shuddered as if something had exhaled after holding its breath for a long time. The reflections in the pillar jittered. Versions of me blinked in and out. Some screamed without sound. Some reached forward, palms flattened against the surface from inside, as if trapped behind glass. Lisa scrambled backward, eyes wide. Elias, she whispered, we should leave. No, I said, though I wasn't sure why. The room felt wrong, but it also felt purposeful, like a trap set before humans learned to travel the stars. The pillar's crack widened. A low tone filled the room, deep, resonant, vibrating my teeth. The carved patterns on the walls lit faintly, lines glowing like veins. And the whisper outside the room, those hungry inhalations, rose to a frantic hiss. They were here. They were at the door. I turned. The smooth circular door bulged inward, as if something pressed against it from the other side. The seam around it glowed, resisting. Vesper, I whispered into my comms. We're in Theta, the stone room. What is this? Vesper's voice came immediately, clearer than before. Compartment Theta is not part of my original architecture, she said. It was installed during retrofit. There are no records. It is older than my memory. That's comforting, I muttered. The door bulged again. A faint line appeared across its surface, like a cut. Then another. Geometry trying to enter. Lisa sobbed, clutching her mouth. They're going to get in. I looked back to the pillar. The crack had become a narrow opening, like a slit. Inside the slit was not light. It was depth. A depth that made my eyes water, as if my brain couldn't process it. I heard something then, not a whisper. A voice. Not from my comms. From the pillar. It spoke in a language that wasn't sound, and yet I understood a fragment, like catching meaning in a dream. Anchor. The word landed in my mind like a weight. A sudden idea, terrible and simple, formed. If the entities were in the ship's time, then they were free to move through moments. They could step around bullets, rewind injuries, learn by repeating. But this room, this pillar, it forced agreement. It hurt them, it pinned them. A cage. Maybe not for humans. For them. I grabbed the chronal pin from my belt. Its core was dim now, drained from the ladder's shaft. I looked at the pillar's crack. What if I could force the pillar to stay open? What if I could make the room's anchoring effect spread? What are you doing? Lisa cried. Buying time, I said. I pressed the chronal pin against the cracked edge of the pillar. The device clicked, magnetically attaching to the obsidian. For a second, nothing happened. Then the pin's core flared again, brighter than before. The crack widened violently. Light, real light, burst out, harsh and white, flooding the room. The carved patterns on the walls blazed. The air shook. Outside, the whisper turned into a scream. The door bulged, then snapped back, as if whatever pressed against it had been burned. Lysa screamed too, shielding her eyes. In the pillar's opening, I saw something. Not the in-between sea. Something else. A space that looked like a narrow corridor made of darkness, lined with the same glowing patterns. And at the far end, a figure. A person. Captain Morrow. Alive. She stood there staring at me, her face expressionless. I stepped forward, heart hammering. "Captain," I shouted, "are you?" Her lips moved. No sound. But I understood. "Don't follow," she mouthed. Then she turned and walked away down the dark corridor inside the pillar. The opening flickered. For a moment I saw another figure behind her, Lieutenant Wren, his neck twisted, eyes open, walking like a puppet. Then he vanished. The pillar's light dimmed suddenly, the chronal pin's core sputtering. The opening began to close. I acted without thinking. I grabbed Lysa's arm. "Come on." "What?" she cried, confused. "Through," I shouted. I pulled her toward the pillar's opening. She resisted, terror in her eyes. "No, Elias, no." The door behind us bulged again. The seam glowed hot. A thin line of darkness slipped through the crack like a needle. The entities were finding the seam. I shoved Lysa through the pillar's opening. Her scream cut off as she passed, swallowed by the dark corridor beyond. I stepped after her. The moment I crossed the threshold, cold hit me like a wave. Not physical cold, conceptual. The cold of being somewhere your body wasn't meant to be. Behind me, the pillar's opening snapped shut. The white light vanished. And I was in a corridor that did not belong to my ship. The walls were stone-etched with glowing lines. The air tasted like dust and electricity. There was no hum of the warp core. There was, instead, a distant sound like tides. Lysa lay on the floor ahead, gasping, clutching her bleeding mouth. "Where are we?" she whispered. I looked down the corridor. It stretched far, curving gently, disappearing into darkness. And scattered along the floor, like discarded clothes, were bodies. Crew uniforms. Security patches. My patch. I took a step closer to the nearest body. It was me. Again. But this time, the corpse's head was missing. And the dark puddle around it moved like a thing thinking. A voice whispered from the walls, not hungry now but tired. "Welcome to the seam," it said. "Welcome to the page between pages." 9. The seam between pages. If warp is a crease, then this place was the stitching. A corridor carved into the logic of the universe, running parallel to our ship's corridors, intersecting them at wrong angles. A maintenance tunnel for reality itself, where the universe stores its mistakes. I knelt beside the headless corpse. The neck stump wasn't torn. It was clean, smooth, as if the head had been unscrewed. The black fluid around it quivered, forming tiny ripples that reflected faces, crew members, strangers, things with too many eyes. Lysa crawled closer, trembling. "Elias, is that?" "Yes," I said softly. She sobbed, muffled blood and tears. I stood and forced myself to look down the corridor. Captain Morrow's silhouette was gone. But the glowing patterns on the walls pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat leading us forward. I didn't want to follow. But behind us, behind the closed pillar opening, I could feel the entities. Their presence pressed like a storm against glass, searching for cracks. And the corridor itself seemed to urge movement. The etched lines on the stone brightened in one direction, dimmed in the other, like a path. We began to walk. Every few meters we passed another body, sometimes a crew member, sometimes me. In one spot I saw Technician Dima sprawled on his back, eyes open, chest rising and falling, alive. But his legs were gone below the knee, and the stumps were sealed smooth, as if his body had been edited. He looked at me and smiled weakly. "You made it," he whispered. "Dima," I said, shocked. "Hold on, wheel." He shook his head. "No," he said, I'm not a full moment anymore. I'm a leftover." He reached out, fingers trembling. "Tell Vesper, tell her to stop counting," he whispered. "The counting attracts them." Then his eyes rolled back, and his body flickered and vanished like a bad transmission. Lysa screamed and clutched my arm. I pulled her close, heart pounding. The corridor ahead curved. Around the bend, a faint glow grew stronger. And then we heard voices. Not whispers. Voices speaking in human language, overlapping, arguing. We rounded the corner and found a wide chamber, like an intersection where multiple corridors met. The stone walls here were taller, the glowing patterns brighter. In the center stood a group of people. Crew members. Alive. But wrong. Captain Morrow, Pilot Chen, Medic Alvarez, 2 techs, Lieutenant Wren, his neck straight here, eyes focused. They stood in a circle around something on the floor, the cargo cylinder. The sealed consortium cylinder, black and sleek, sitting on the stone like it belonged there. Captain Morrow looked up and saw me. Her face softened with relief. "Elias," she said, "thank God we found it." I stared bewildered. "Found it how?" "We dropped out of the corridor," she said quickly, words tumbling. "The ship it's still jumping, but we're in the seam. We can end this." Lieutenant Wren stepped forward. His eyes looked normal, too normal. "Listen to the captain," he said. "We figured it out. The entities are tied to the cargo. It's a beacon like Havel suspected. If we destroy it here in the seam, we cut their access." My mind reeled. "Havel told you." Captain Morrow hesitated. "No," she admitted. We found him." She gestured to the side. Against the wall lay Engineer Havel's body, slumped, eyes open. Dead. But his mouth moved silently. His hand twitched, pointing at the cylinder. Lysa clutched my sleeve. "Elias, something's wrong." I knew. It was too neat, too hopeful, too story-like. The seam didn't give gifts. It gave loops. I looked at Captain Morrow's eyes. In the pupils, tiny reflections shifted, geometries moving like insects. I stepped back, hand on my pistol. "Captain," I said slowly, "what did you see when you died in Corridor C?" Her smile faltered. "I didn't," she said. "I never died." Lie. I had watched her split. I had heard her realize it. Lieutenant Wren's voice sharpened. "Elias," he snapped, "we don't have time for paranoia. Help us." The group shifted subtly, like a school of fish. Their movements were synchronized. Too synchronized. I felt the air chill. The etched patterns on the walls dimmed. The whisper returned, louder, hungry. The crew circle's mouths began to move at the same time. They spoke in unison. "We need you to open it," they said. "You opened us, open it." My blood ran ice. I raised my pistol. "You're not them," I said. "You're not my crew." Captain Morrow's face stretched. Her smile widened unnaturally, teeth gleaming. "We are what you remember," she said. "We are what you repeat." Lieutenant Wren's eyes went black. The tech's skin rippled, shifting under their uniforms like something swimming. Lysa screamed and ran behind me. The circle stepped forward. And time fractured. I saw myself firing. I saw myself missing. I saw myself falling. I saw my own corpse on the stone floor, headless. I saw the black puddle thinking. All of it at once. And then, like a page turning, I was back in the moment before the circle moved, pistol raised, finger on trigger. A loop. They had caught us in a loop. The entities smiled through human faces. "Again," they whispered. And the corridor war began anew, inside a single second. 10. A war inside 1 second. Fighting in a loop is like fighting in a dream, where you're the only one who remembers waking. The first time I shot Captain Morrow. The bullet hit her forehead. Her head snapped back. She fell. Then everything snapped back too, rewinding like a tape, and she was standing again, smiling. The second time, I shot the cylinder. The bullet struck its surface and flattened, like hitting a wall of rubber. The cylinder hummed softly, and the etched patterns on the stone brightened as if pleased. The third time, I grabbed Lysa and ran back down the corridor. We made it 3 turns before the corridor folded, and we were back in the chamber, facing the circle again. Every time the entities adjusted, they learned, they anticipated. They weren't just resetting the moment. They were refining it. "Stop," Lysa sobbed, clutching her mouth, blood slick on her hands. "We can't." "Yes, we can," I snarled, more at myself than her. "We can break it." "How?" she cried. I thought of the chronal pin. It was still attached to the pillar back in Theta, or maybe it was. Maybe it had never been. In the seam, cause and effect were suggestions. But the pin had forced alignment once. And Havel had said something else. "You have to die. That's how you find the seam." Was my death the key? Was the loop built around it? I looked at my own headless corpse in my vision, the future landmark. I thought of the black puddle, thinking. I realized something then, a cold clarity cutting through the terror. The entities weren't killing us because they wanted meat. They were killing us because death creates echoes. A death inside a loop is a loud note. It reverberates. It becomes a handle for them to grab. They wanted me dead in the seam because my death would anchor the loop. And they wanted it to happen in a specific way. Head removed. So the mind, my mind, could be separated from the body, leaving a hollow version they could wear. My stomach churned. I had to change the shape of my death. Or avoid it. But the corridor kept showing me the same landmark. I needed a new landmark. I needed to choose an ending they weren't expecting. I turned to Lysa. "Do you trust me?" I asked. She stared at me, eyes red, terrified. "No," she whispered honestly, "but I don't have anyone else." "Fair." I nodded toward the cylinder. "We can't destroy it with bullets," I said, "but maybe we can open it." Lysa recoiled. "That's what they want." "Yes," I said, "but not like this." I took a deep breath and raised my pistol again. The circle smiled, stepping forward in unison. I fired not at them. At the etched patterns on the floor beneath the cylinder. The stone cracked, light flaring. The chamber shuddered. The loop hesitated. For a fraction of a heartbeat, the rewinding stuttered. The crew forms frowned, confusion flickering. I fired again, tracing a line of destruction through the glowing patterns like cutting wires. The chamber's hum changed. The cylinder pulsed. Lieutenant Wren Thing lunged. His hand became an angle mid-swing, slicing air. I dove, dragging Lysa down. The angle passed over us and struck the floor, carving a clean line through stone that continued beyond the chamber, beyond reality. Cold wind howled from the cut, smelling like nothing. The entities hissed. The loop slipped. I felt time stumble. This was it, a gap. I rolled, grabbed the cylinder's latch interface. The consortium cylinder had no simple latch. It used biometric seals, encryption, quantum keys. I shouldn't have been able to open it. But my hand touched the surface, and the cylinder recognized me. Not my fingerprint. My timeline. It hummed and unlocked with a soft click. The crew form screamed, their mouths opening too wide. "No," they hissed, "not yet, not that." I threw the cylinder lid open. Inside was not cargo. Not an artifact. Not a creature. It was a mirror. a perfect circular disk of dark glass, floating in suspension. And in its surface, I saw the in-between sea, the drifting shapes, the angles. I saw a door the entities used, a portable seam, a beacon. And as I stared, the mirror stared back. A face surfaced in the dark glass. Not mine, not human. A vast, faceless presence that pressed against the mirror from the other side, filling it like an ocean fills a hole. And it looked at me. And I understood why the consortium wanted this. Because it was proof. Proof that there was something between worlds. Something alive. Something watching. The presence pushed. The mirror surface bulged. The chamber's etched patterns flared wildly, then began to dim. The loop screamed, unraveling. The crew forms convulsed, their bodies splitting into shadows and angles. Lysa shrieked. I grabbed the mirror disc with both hands. It was cold, slick. And it began to pull. Not physically. It pulled on my memories. On my future. On the part of me that had already died. I felt my own corpse like a hook in my gut. The mirror wanted to connect to it. To complete the circuit. I clenched my teeth and fought. Then Vesper's voice cut through the chaos, crystal clear. Elias Sato, she said, if you open the beacon in the seam, the ship will become a mouth. My hands shook. What's the alternative? I shouted. There was a pause. Then softly, become the cork. And I knew what she meant. I had to close the door. From the inside. I had to trap the entities in the seam with the beacon, seal it with a human life as the stopper. A sacrifice. But maybe not just sacrifice. Maybe a choice that would change the landmark. A new death. One they couldn't wear. I looked at Lysa, sobbing on the floor, face streaked with blood. I looked at the writhing crew forms, the entities shedding human shapes like skins. I looked into the mirror, into the vast presence pressing through. And I made my decision. I stepped forward and pressed my forehead against the mirror. Take me, I whispered. The mirror swallowed my reflection. And the world turned inside out. 11. The mouth between dimensions. Imagine drowning, but instead of water, it's moments. Imagine your lungs filling with seconds that don't belong to you. Imagine your heartbeat sinking to a clock you can't see. The mirror pulled me through. There was no sensation of movement, only of separation, as if my body and my mind briefly disagreed on what me was. I fell into the in-between sea. Not physically. There was no up, no down, no gravity. I floated in darkness filled with drifting shapes. They weren't jellyfish now. They were thoughts, half-formed, moving slowly, leaving trails of faint light like afterimages. Around me, angles moved, sharp lines of shadow, slicing through the dark, folding space as they passed. And everywhere the whisper. Not a chorus now. A language. I couldn't understand it, but I could feel its intention. Curiosity, hunger, mimicry. The entities surrounded me, not as bodies, but as boundaries in the dark. They pressed close, studying. I felt them touching my memories, flipping through them like pages. Childhood training, Ren dying, Captain splitting, Lysa screaming, the loop. They lingered on my death visions, fascinated. Then the vast presence arrived. It wasn't one of them. It was the environment. The ocean itself becoming aware. It pressed against me, and the in-between brightened slightly, as if lit by a distant, cold star. In that dim light I saw the seam corridor again, stone walls, etched patterns. But now I saw it from the other side. I saw bodies pressed into the stone like fossils in rock. I saw dozens, hundreds of human shapes, frozen mid-scream, mid-run, mid-fall, people who had stumbled into the seam and never left. I saw versions of me among them. Some missing heads, some missing hands, some smiling. They were not corpses. They were bookmarks. The entities used them to navigate. I understood then what Havel meant. You have to die. That's how you find the seam. Death makes a marker in time, a fixed point, a nail. The entities hammered nails into humans. And the consortium had delivered them a new hammer. The mirror beacon. I felt my consciousness slipping, tugged toward one of the fossilized Elias shapes in the stone. The one I'd seen on the corridor floor, headless, black puddle thinking. That was the landmark they wanted me to become. A hollow vessel. A copy they could wear into the ship. I fought, but my thoughts were slow here. Time was thick. Then I felt something else. A hand. Not physical. A pressure on my mind, firm, familiar. Vesper. The ship mind reached into the in-between through the beacon's connection. Her computational presence, a sharp, bright line cutting through the dark. Elias, she said, not with sound but directly into my awareness. Hold your identity, anchor to my signal. How? I thought, panic flaring. Tell me your name, Vesper said. My name. Simple. A truth. A tether. Elias Sato, I thought, clinging to it. Tell me your first memory, Vesper insisted. I closed my eyes, if eyes existed here, and reached. A kitchen, a knife, my hand cut, blood, my mother's gasp, the smell of onions. Elias, Vesper said, voice steady, tell me your last memory. Last? I hadn't had it yet. But in the seam, last could be first. I saw it then, clear, inevitable. My own hand writing this log. My voice speaking into a recorder in a corridor, longer than the ship. My corpse on the floor. My corpse warning me. Don't turn around. The loop. The landmark. No. I refused. I chose a different last memory. I reached for Lysa. For her sobbing face. For the blood on her hands. For her teeth floating away. I grabbed that image like a rope. I remember her, I thought. I remember Lysa Noor. I remember her screaming my name. The entities hissed, displeased. They pressed harder, trying to pry my attention away. The vast presence ocean shifted. And the in-between sea rippled. A path opened in the darkness, a corridor of brighter patterns leading toward something. Toward the seam corridor intersection. Toward the ship. Toward escape. Vesper's presence flared. I can pull you back, she said. But not alone. The beacon is open. The entities are entering. We need to seal it. I'm trying, I thought, desperate. I'm here. I'm the cork. You are not sufficient, Vesper replied. A harsh truth. Humans are small. So I did the only thing left. I let go. Not of myself, of the fear. I stopped fighting the pull toward the headless landmark. I allowed my consciousness to drift toward that fossilized Elias shape in the stone. The entities surged, excited. Yes. Become the vessel. Become the bookmark. But at the last second, when I felt my mind aligning with that hollow shape, I changed one detail. I reached back into my own memory and grabbed the chronal pins sound, the bell tone that forced time to agree. I imagined that tone inside my skull. I amplified it. I made it my heartbeat. The bell rang in the in-between. It wasn't a sound. It was a rule. Time snapped. The entities froze, startled. The vast presence recoiled, rippling. I slammed my identity into the hollow landmark like a spike. Not as emptiness. As an anchor. As a locked moment. Elias Sato. Here. Now. Mine. The seam corridor lit up like a circuit. The fossilized bodies shuddered. The entities screamed without mouths. And through the beacon's connection, Vesper pulled. I felt myself yanked backward, through the mirror, through the seam, toward the ship. The in-between tried to hold me, sticky and hungry. The entities clawed at my memories, desperate to take something with them. I clutched my name like a weapon. I burst through the mirror and slammed back into the stone chamber intersection. The crew forms were gone, replaced by shadow smears on the walls. The cylinder lay open, the mirror disc dim, its surface cracked. Lysa lay nearby, unconscious, blood crusted on her lips. The etched patterns on the floor were broken where I'd shot them. And in the air, suspended like a thought, hung a black droplet. It pulsed. It looked at me. It was the last remnant of the entity that had tried to wear me. And it smiled. "You anchored," it whispered in my voice, "so we'll use your anchor." The droplet shot toward my head. I raised my pistol. But the bullet froze halfway, hanging in the air. Time clotted again. The droplet touched my forehead. And I saw my corpse. Not on the stone. Not headless. In corridor C, face down, in a pool of dark fluid. My corpse opened its eyes. And spoke. "Don't turn around." I screamed. And everything snapped back to the corridor. To the beginning. To junction C17. To the hum. To the whisper. The countdown on my wrist console read. 00, 11:04 remaining. I was back. But this time, I remembered everything. And the corridor walls were already wet. 12, the only way out is through. You might think the worst part is dying. It is. The worst part is knowing you will die and still having to walk toward it because every other direction loops. I tried different choices. I tried not touching my corpse. I tried not turning around. I tried staying in my bunk and letting someone else patrol. I tried disabling my comms, smashing my wrist console, hiding in the galley. Each attempt ended the same way. The whisper found me. The corridor opened. An angle touched someone. Time fractured. I saw myself dead. Sometimes it was Ren's death, sometimes Lysa's, sometimes Captain Morrow's. But always eventually mine. The entities weren't omnipotent. They didn't control everything. But they were persistent, and they were patient, and they had the advantage of being able to browse. They learned each time I ran the loop. They adjusted. And each time I anchored a little more. My memory became heavier. My identity became a lighthouse. And lighthouses attract storms. Vesper spoke to me through the loops, her voice sometimes delayed, sometimes early. "You are creating a stable recurrence," she said in one iteration. "A cycle, a pattern." "Can you break it?" I begged. "I can mitigate," she replied. "I can prune, but the seam is bound to your death marker. The entities have tied the beacon to you." "So what?" I shouted. "I just keep dying forever." A pause. Then Vesper said softly, "Not forever, only until you choose the correct death." Correct. As if there was a right way to die. I found compartment Theta again, many times. Sometimes the pillar opened. Sometimes it didn't. Sometimes the door was already cracked as if someone else had tried. Sometimes the room was full of bodies. I opened the cylinder again. Sometimes it was a mirror. Sometimes it was empty. Sometimes it contained a small, humming stone that sang my name. The loops were not identical. They were variations. The entities experimented. But one thing remained consistent: corridor C. The first body. My corpse phased on. The warning. Don't turn around. I started to understand. The warning wasn't to prevent me from turning. It was to prevent me from seeing something behind me. Something that would change my choice. Because in the corridor when I turned, I saw Captain Morrow die. And that death led me down the path to Theta. Theta led to the beacon. The beacon led to the seam. The seam led to the anchor. The anchor led back to the corridor. A circuit. A mouth. The entities weren't just boarding the ship. They were using the ship as a tunnel to spread their habitat into our reality. And my looping death was the hinge. If I wanted to end it, I needed to break the circuit. Not by surviving. By dying differently. I needed to die in a way that did not create a usable echo. A death that did not leave a hollow vessel. A death that sealed. A cork. So in the loop that finally mattered, I did something simple. When I saw my corpse in Corridor C, I didn't touch it. I didn't turn around. I didn't call Ren. I didn't run. I sat down next to my body. I stared at my own dead back. And I began to speak. I spoke my name. I spoke my first memory. I spoke my last chosen memory, Lysa's face. I spoke everything that made me, out loud into the corridor air like a prayer. The corridor walls pulsed, listening. The whisper gathered, eager. Behind me, the tear in space opened. I could feel the angle approaching. I could hear Captain Morrow's footsteps behind me, arriving from a death that hadn't happened yet. I kept speaking. I kept anchoring. I told the universe, in a corridor that refused to agree on time, that this moment was mine. And then when the angle touched my shoulder, I did not resist. I leaned into it. I let it split me. But not into halves. Not into loops. I let it take my head. I offered it willingly, like a man handing over a key. The angle jerked, surprised. It wanted struggle, it wanted fear, it wanted a violent echo. I gave it calm. I gave it surrender. And as my head separated from my body, clean, smooth, I focused on one thought, one rule, one bell tone. Close. The chronal pin wasn't there physically, but the sound was in my mind. The bell rang. Time snapped. The seam corridor lit. The beacon choked. The entities screamed. And in that frozen instant, between my head leaving my body and my body falling, I saw the corridor behind me. I saw Captain Morrow standing there, alive and dead layered together, tears on her cheeks. I saw Lieutenant Wren reaching for me, his hand existing in 3 seconds at once. I saw Lysa in the service tunnel, teeth intact, eyes wide. And I saw the entity droplet that had tried to wear me, flailing, trapped. My death wasn't a hollow vessel. It was a closed door. My head fell. My body fell. But my identity stayed, pinned to that moment like a nail that refused to be pulled. The corridor's black puddle, me, was not empty. It was full. Full of name. Full of memory. Full of refusal. And the entities, hungry for emptiness, found only a mirror. They tried to step through. They hit my anchored death and recoiled like touching hot metal. The tear in space shuddered. It closed. The hum of warp steadied. The countdown on my wrist console, on the console that no longer belonged to a body, ticked down properly. 000312. 000311. 000310. Vesper's voice whispered into the anchored moment. "Thank you," she said. Then the ship jumped out of warp. Normal space returned like a breath. And the corridor, my corridor, stayed behind, locked in the seam, a scar stitched shut with a human name. Epilogue: if you hear this, turn back. I don't know when this recording will reach you. In some loops, it never does. In some, it reaches a salvage crew years later, drifting near a dead ship. In others, it plays in the background of a quiet station bar, and no one listens. But if it reaches you and you're planning a jump, and you've heard rumors of a consortium cylinder, a black mirror, A secret retrofit. Don't take it. Don't open it. And if you ever hear a whisper in the walls of your ship during warp, if the hum shifts and the metal feels wet under your hand, if you see your own body lying in a corridor before you've died, do not assume it's a warning meant to save you. Sometimes it's a landmark meant to use you. Sometimes the only way to stop the mouth is to become the cork. My name is Elias Sato. I died in a corridor that refused to agree on time. And if you're hearing this, you're close enough that the in-between can hear you too. Stop the jump. Turn back before you meet yourself.